Okay, it's now 6 o'clock. I'll call the special meeting of Hanwell Council for June the 2023 to order, please. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Seconder?
I'll second.
Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thank you, Council. Item 3, Capital Region Service Commission, Little Munchkins Preschool, Inc.
Okay.
Would it be okay if I go up there so I can see everybody?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Do you want the podium back there?
See the motion.
We don't need a motion, we need the presentation first.
Right? Presentation first.
Okay, so the first presentation is Little Munchkins Preschool Incorporated, similar non-conforming use.
Okay, can you guys hear that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Consideration of a similar non-conforming use to permit a daycare to be located on a property zoned commercial and light industrial in the Hanwell Bylaw 11/2016, the rural community of Hanwell. So this application is by Little Munchkins Preschool to put a daycare in the building located at 1757 Route 640. The property has been and is still the location of a dance school. The Community Planning Act allows a non-conforming use to be changed to a similar non-conforming use, and if approved by the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee. The Little Munchkins Daycare would provide an after-school center for 30 children between the ages of 5 and 12, Monday to Friday only. During the school year, the center would be open from the end of the school day to 5:15. The center hours would be 7 a.m. to 5:15 in the summer. The daycare would be on the second floor of the building with a play area constructed behind the building. There are a few residential properties with the majority of commercial properties within 100 meters of the property, and there are no water courses or wetlands on the property. So notification of this meeting went to property owners located within 100 meters of the property, and to date there has been no response from any neighbors. So I just want to go through the attachments that are included with your package. So the first one showing the property from Service New Brunswick, and the second one showing you where the property is located, GOMB map showing where the building is located on the property. And the third map just showing you a big blow outage so you can see where the property is in relation to the rest of the area around. Schedule A is the application for Little Munchkins. And you'll note that there is, we do have permission from the property owner for this application to be presented. They have drawn an application to show what the layout would be on the second floor of the building and try to show where the outdoor play area would be on the building. And the last attachment is from the owner of the property. So the proposed use of a daycare is not permitted under the Commercial and Light Industrial Zone in the Hanwell Bylaw 11/2016, the Rural Community of Hanwell Rural Plan. A legal non-conforming use of a dance school has been occurring for a number of years. Staff feels that a daycare is sufficiently similar to the present use of a dance school. Staff recommends that the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee of the Capital Region Service Commission permit a daycare as a similar non-conforming to be located on PID number 75552158, subject to the following terms and conditions. So terms and conditions 1 to 5. The parking be in accordance with applicable provisions of section 4.6 of the Hanwell Bylaw 11/2016. That all signs be in accordance with applicable provisions of Bylaw 10/2015, the bylaw to regulate signs. That building permit be obtained from the Planning and Development Division of Capital Region Service Commission prior to any renovations of the building. That approval be received from the Department of Public Safety addressing any septic concerns for the addition of a daycare to the building. and that all exterior lighting be located, arranged, or shielded as not to interfere with local traffic or with nearby landowners in the reasonable enjoyment of their properties. And that's my presentation.
Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I move that the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee of the Capital Region Service Commission permit a daycare as a similar non-conforming use to be located on PID number 75552158, subject to the following terms and conditions. 1, that parking be in accordance with applicable provisions of Section 4.6 of the Hanwell Bylaw 11-2016, the Rural Community of Hanwell Rural Plan Regulation. 2, that all signs be in accordance with applicable provisions of bylaw number 10-2015, a bylaw to regulate signs, and in accordance with any applicable Department of Transportation and Infrastructure policies. 3, that a building permit be obtained from the Planning and Development Division of Capital Region Service Commission prior to renovations of the building. 4, that approval be received from the Department of Public Safety addressing any septic concerns for the addition of a daycare to the building. 5, that exterior lighting be located, arranged, or shielded as not to interfere with local traffic or with nearby landowners in the reasonable enjoyment of their properties. 6, that the number of children be restricted based on the maximum allowable number of children allowed as per licensing regulation, Early Childhood Services Act. And 7, that the operation of the daycare adheres to the Early Childhood Services Act along with any other applicable regulations.
Thank you, Councillor Hyacinth. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
All right, any questions, comments?
Councillor Kraus has a question.
I just got one question. With what is being stored in the back of the building, was that,
Pardon me?
with what was being stored in the back of that building, because there's a fireworks wholesaler in there?
Oh, in the building
Yes,
itself?
it is, yes.
Yeah, and they're regulated by the government. and
Yeah,
the
but I'm just
government.
wondering if this stuff here something like that should have been forwarded on to, like, probably the fire marshal's office and even the fire department ourselves. So, I mean, not that I'm against it by any stretch, it's
No,
just
no.
that stuff, especially where they're gonna be using the second floor of the building, we need,
We can certainly forward that on.
we really need honestly, the fire department should have a final walkthrough at the end, or before it opens or whatever, just for the purpose of safety.
And I also believe that's part of when they contact early childhood, it's part of the process when they do that as well.
Yep.
But is that another condition you would like to add to
No, I
this?
just wanted to know if they, I figured it would be, but it needed to be, I just wanted to know,
Thank you.
so.
Okay, no one else has questions.
Any other questions?
No,
Okay.
nothing from me.
All right, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those reminded? Motion carried. Thank you, Council. Okay, item 4, Capital Region Service Commission, Linda Chessie subdivision, 4 lots, private access to Yoho Lake, either land for public purposes up to 8% or up to 8% cash.
Okay. So it's an application by Southwest Surveys on behalf of the owner to create 4 lots on a private right-of-way known as John Chessie Drive in Yoho Lake. The property is zoned Yoho Watershed under the Rural Community of Hanwell Rural Plan and permits the proposed residential use. There are wetlands affected by this subdivision. Southwest Surveys worked with Courtney Johnson, wetland biologist, Surface Water Management, Department of Environment, and local government to field delineate the wetlands affected by this subdivision. Mapping was provided to the surveyor. The updated wetland information is represented on this tentative subdivision plan. The Rural Community of Hanwell bylaw does have a section on land for public purposes as shown in attachment A, and that will be brought up later in the presentation. The Department of Environment, as stated, provided updated mapping for the wetlands. Southwest Surveys approved the proposed lots for septic, and the lots will require modifications to locate a septic system. A site distance report was not required since the proposed lots are being created on an existing right-of-way. The Department of Environment and Local Government Surface Water Management Branch has reviewed the tentative plan and have provided comments to proceed. Their comments are included in attachment B. As 9 lots have been created on this property since 1998, an abbreviated water supply assessment is required, and this must be done before any further lots can be created. They can be approved, they can't be created until we have that study done. So prior to final approval of the plan, an agreement with the rural community of Hanwell must be made for land for public purposes. Right-of-way agreements across the remnant property should be included with the deeds to be registered. And if you want to flip through the attachments before I go into the recommendation. So the very first document is showing the lots being created and showing where the buffers are with regards to the wetlands. Map number 2 shows you the lots being created. Surrey, New Brunswick map. Again, GOMB showing you again where the lots are being created. And you'll notice on this map you don't see all these new wetlands because they're not actually in the provincial government system yet. And item 3B, it's just showing the location to give you an idea where Yoho Lake is within the vicinity. Section attachment A goes through the document for land for public purposes. And document B is from the document provided by Department of Environment and Local Government with any terms and conditions that they require for the work to be done. So as the lots are suitable for the purpose intended and as a private right-of-way exists, staff recommends that the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee of the Capital Region Service Commission approve a 20-meter wide right-of-way for the development of land as shown on plan Linda Chessie Subdivision Phase 23-1, subject to A, the final plan of subdivision being stamped with the private right-of-way note, B, the 30-meter buffer from the wetlands being shown on, and the following statement being added to the final plan. This area is subject to Regulation 90-80, Watercourse and Wetland Alteration Regulation, Clean Water Act. C, the final plan of subdivision including the statement, watercourses, wetlands, and the 30-meter buffers are regulated features, and any alterations within those areas require a permit issued by the Department of Environment and Local Government, such as, but not limited to, soil disturbance, removal of vegetation, placement of a structure, etc. These features are regulated as per their presence on the ground. It is the responsibility of the landowner to ensure no alterations take place in those areas without a watercourse and wetland alteration WAWA permit. D, an abbreviated water supply assessment being completed and the conclusions being favorable to development or water quality advisory note being placed on the final plan of subdivision. And E, an arrangement for land for public purposes being made with the rural community of Hanwell prior to stamping of the final plan. And that's my presentation.
Okay, so I need a motion to, for the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee of the Capital Region Service Commission approve a 20-meter wide subdivision right of way for the development of land as shown on Plan Linda Chessie Subdivision Plan 23-1. I need that motion.
Yep. I move that the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee of the Capital Region Service Commission approve a 20-meter wide right-of-way for the development of land as shown on plan Linda Chessie Subdivision Phase 23-1, subject to A, the final plan of subdivision being stamped with the private right-of-way note, B, the 30-meter buffer from the wetlands being shown on and following the following statement being added to the final plan. This area is subject to Regulation 90-80, Watercourse and Wetland Alteration Regulation, Clean Water Act. C, the final plan of subdivision including the following statement, watercourses, wetlands, and the 30-meter buffers are regulated features, and any alterations within those areas require a permit issued by the Department of Environment and Local Government, such as, but not limited to, soil disturbance, removal of vegetation, placement of a structure, etc. These features are regulated as per their presence on the ground, it is the responsibility of the landowner to ensure no alterations take place in those areas without a watercourse and wetland alteration (WAWA) permit. D, an abbreviated water supply assessment being completed and the conclusions being favorable to development, or a water quality advisory note being placed on the final plan of subdivision. And E, an arrangement for land for public purposes being made with the rural community of Hanwell prior to stamping of the final plan.
Have a seconder?
I'll second.
Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those contrary minded? Motion carried, thank you. Now we need a motion for either land for public purposes up to 8% or fees up to 8%.
I'd like to make a motion. Do we know?
Okay,
Hello?
okay.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, I don't know if anybody can hear me or not. Wasn't sure what's going on. Okay, I move that the rural community of Hanwell receive the fee of $1 per lot for the Linda Chessie subdivision for the land for public purposes.
Do I have a seconder? No seconder, that motion will die. Do I have another motion for land for public purposes, either up to 8% or fees up to 8%?
I recommend that the rural community of Hanwell request an amount per each proposed lot as shown on the table in the file before us. Do I read that amount or to be in the motion?
To the 8% of land or 8% of fees?
8% of fees to be paid for land for public purposes.
Do I have a seconder?
Second.
All those in favor, any other questions?
Excuse me. We usually have discussion after something being seconded,
Yeah. Do we have any questions?
right? Yes, we do. Okay, I'd like to point out from this that the intent of this bylaw, the 8% for land for public purposes, was meant to be for commercial developments of properties that are people are building subdivisions. So that, as in the case of the subdivisions that we have already, we realized at the time that there was no place for parks, and so that was the main objective of this. And we realizing that in some cases it wouldn't be feasible to take the land, we put it for up to 8%. To me, this is an example of one that should not be. We have two other cases in the area. One being that were commercial developers who did not have to pay the land for public purposes because they came off of a public road. For example, the one on the Scott Road that we just approved in last year was a developer who bought that whole piece of land, divided it up into 5 or 6 pieces, but because they could put a road in off of the 640 and call it a driveway as the access to those lots, they were not eligible for land for public purposes. We do have another one coming up, I believe, this afternoon too, of the 640, that LRG development in next to the Smith Road. That is also going to be a commercial developer who has dividing off those lots. But because they're a commercial developer, they have the ability and the money to put those in as public roads. So therefore, because they're going to be approved by DTI, they're also not eligible for land for public purposes, which means that they could build a whole subdivision in there and have no park, provide no payment for land for public services, just because they are a developer. They are actually the people that this bylaw was intended for, which to me is why I believe it needs to be changed when our next rural plan comes around. In this case, these people are small farm owners. They're obviously getting, selling they're not using their land as a farm anymore. They have no choice to put their lots off of a private road because that's the only road that's there, and that road is not eligible to become a public road. So therefore, they are I feel we're being very unfair in this situation because they do have no other option. Had they were able to develop those lots on the other side of their property on 640, they would not be having to pay this tax. And so that's why I do believe that we should not be charging them up to 8%, which is why my original motion of $1 was, I thought, very fair. Anyway, that's my comments.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, all those in favor of the motion on the floor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those contrary minded?
Nay.
Okay, we have one nay, that means the motion is carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 5, Capital Region Service Commission, LRG Development Inc.
So this application is for the consideration and the recommendation of the creation of 2 new public streets to the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure for assent. So it's an application by Southwest Surveys on behalf of the owner to create the 2 new public streets to service 5 residential lots. The property is located off Route 640. The property is zoned rural under the Rural Community of Hanwell Rural Plan. The proposed uses are permitted. We will look at land for public purposes as per attachment A in this subdivision. The Department of Transportation and Infrastructure has approved the location of the 2 proposed streets, and there's no response to date from MB 911 for the proposed street names to be approved. However, this is a requirement before the final plans can be stamped. GEMTAC Consulting Engineers and Scientists Limited confirmed that a watercourse or its 30-meter buffer is present on the property. A wetland delineation report written by GEMTAC was submitted to the Surface Water Management Branch of the Department of Environment and Local Government, included as attachment B. Southwest Surveys have approved the proposed lots for septic, and the lots may require modifications to locate a septic system. Just go through the attachments, in case there's any questions. First one showing you the subdivision plan along with the buffers for the wetlands and any water courses that are there. Each lot also shows the usable area that's outside of each one of the buffers. Map number 2, Service New Brunswick, showing you where the lots are on the ground. Again, you'll notice that these maps aren't showing the wetlands that are showing as are showing on the tentative plan. And map 3B is just showing the location, the vicinity of the property. Land for public purposes is attachment A, and attachment B is the document from Department of Environment and Local Government, the Surface Water Management Branch. So prior
Mr.
to...
Roberts?
No, she's still continuing.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Prior to final approval of the plan, an agreement with the Rural Community of Hanwell for land for public purposes will need to be made. As the lots are suitable for the purpose intended and favorable comments have been received from DTI, and as approval for septic has been received, staff recommends the creation of 2 new public streets as shown on plan LRG Developments Limited, subdivision phase 23-1, to the Minister of Transportation for assent, subject to A, the 30-meter buffer being shown from the wetlands being shown on and the following statement added to the final plan. This area is subject to Regulation 90-80, Watercourse and Wetland Alteration Regulation Clean Water Act. B is the statement from the document from Department of Environment and Local Government with regards to wetland requirements. C, street names are approved and registered with MB 911 before the stamping of the final plan. And D, an arrangement for land for public purposes being made with the Rural Community of Hanwell prior to stamping of the final plan. That's it.
Thank you, Robert. Can I get somebody to make a motion, please?
I move that the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee of the Capital Region Service Commission recommend the creation of 2 new public streets as shown on plan LRG Developments Limited, subdivision phase 23-1, to the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure for assent, subject to A, the 30-meter buffer from wetlands being shown on and the following statement being added to the final plan. This area is subject to Regulation 90-80, Watercourse and Wetland Alteration Regulation Clean Water Act. B, the final plan of subdivision, including the following statement. Watercourses, wetlands, and the 30-meter buffers are regulated features, and any alterations within those areas require a permit issued by the Department of Environment and Local Government, such as, but not limited to, soil disturbance, removal of vegetation, placement of a structure, etc. These features are regulated as per their presence on the ground. It is the responsibility of the landowner to ensure no alterations take place in those areas without a watercourse and wetland alteration WAWA permit. C, street names are approved and registered with NB 911 before the stamping of final plans. And D, an arrangement for land for public purposes being made with the rural community of Hanwell prior to stamping of the plan.
Okay, can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second.
Any questions, comments?
I have two quick questions, and it's probably in here, but I'm just not reading it the right way. So since you're so close, I can ask you that. So these two streets
Yes,
will be built by the developer as
Yes.
part of the project,
yes.
and will they be dealing with a WAWA permit terms and conditions where they cross here?
Yes, their engineer has to work with WAWA and the Department of Transportation Infrastructure to be able to develop that section of the road. The surveyor worked with Department of Transportation and Environment before the road was placed where it's placed to try to get the,
Narrowest.
yeah,
And these streets will become DTI streets?
Mhm.
Okay.
yes, they will.
And the second question is just for interest, because I've never thought about the name of a new street before. Is that regulated by a database of some sort to make sure it's not duplicating? Or is it at the wishes of the developer?
So the developer or anyone who wants a new public street, they provide two names.
Okay.
We provide them to NB 911. They check the names and check the local emergency services to make sure there's no duplicates. And they'll come back and say you can have choice 1, 2, or maybe you can only have choice 2. But it's an NB 911 that has a database that regulates that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those contrary minded? Motion carries, thank you. Item number 6, the Capital Region Service Commission in Spring Hill Farm subdivision to approve an undersized lot accessed by a right-of-way located south of the tower. Can I get a motion, please?
Point of
Point
I
of
couldn't hear a
order.
word you said.
Okay. Item 6, Capital Region Service Commission in the Spring Hill Farm subdivision, an undersized lot and a right-of-way located south of the tower.
Point of order. Dave?
Yep.
Mayor Morrison, they need to make a motion for land or fees.
Oh, sorry, backed up. Sorry about that, guys. Can I get a motion for land for public purposes, or the up to 8%, or up to 8% fees, please?
I don't know how to word that.
I used underneath the table, there was a sentence. Maybe that'll help you. The recommendation.
I move that we receive 8% of the cost of the land.
Seconder,
I'll second.
any questions, comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's important.
Contrary minded?
It's not.
Motion carried. All right, now moving on to item
Excuse me, could I, point of clarification? Is that allowed now?
Point of order.
Point of order?
Mayor Morrison, Councillor Peck has a clarification.
Just for clarification, the recommendation is that from the Service Commission is that the rural community of Hanwell request an amount per each proposed lot, as shown in the table in the recommendation document to us, to be paid for land for public purposes. So that just was missing in the initial motion. I'm not sure how you add it.
We can amend the motion.
I think Councillor Fox said 80% of the value of each lot.
He didn't add for each lot.
Yes, he did.
No, I didn't.
No,
Can I amend the motion?
can you rescind the motion?
You can?
Rescind it.
Yeah. Well, I'll rescind the motion.
Seconder.
I'll second, sir.
All those in favor of rescinding that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those contrary minded? Okay, can I ask for a redo of that motion, please?
It is recommended that the rural community of Hanwell request an amount per each proposed lot as shown in the table that the Service Commission has provided to us in their recommendations regarding this file, to be paid for land for public purposes.
Can you make a motion then to take the recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions?
Seconder.
Seconder.
Comments?
I'll second.
Seconder? Any questions, comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thank you.
Councillor Jonah, did you vote?
Yeah.
Was it aye?
Or,
Because I couldn't hear you.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, item number 6 on the agenda, Capital Region Service Commission and the Spring Hill Farm subdivision.
So Spring Hill Farms subdivision, the consideration of the creation of one lot on a private access, and consideration of variances in area, width, and depth of a lot. It's an application by Hub Surveys on behalf of the owners to create one lot on a 6-meter wide private access, and this lot will be used for a communication tower. The property is zoned rural under the Rural Community of Hanwell Rural Plan, and while the proposed use of a communication tower is not listed as a permitted use in the zone, paragraph 2.23 of the Rural Community of Hanwell Plan states that this use is permitted in all zones. This use being the communication tower. Typically towers are on leased land, however there is a clause in the Community Planning Act 81D that if a lease period is over 10 years, the property is not exempt from subdivision. The Rural Community of Hanwell subdivision bylaw has a section on land for public purposes. As this lot is being created as per the Community Planning Act, not being sold and will not be a buildable lot, it is recommended that the land for public purposes does not apply. The subdivision does not affect the map wetlands on the remnant property. A site distance assessment is not required as the access exists, and as this lot is not for residential use, a septic assessment was not required. A right-of-way agreement to cross over the remnant property should be included with the deed to be registered. As the lot is being used for utility purposes, staff feel the lot being created on a 6-meter wide private access is reasonable. As the lot proposed is much smaller in area than the minimum size lot requirements, staff is recommending that a note be added to the final plan, which will state that the lot is not to be used for any residential use or any other use that requires a septic system. The future development potential of the property is not negatively affected by this subdivision. So map 1 shows the access coming in off of the Hanwell Road and showing the lot that's being created. And map 2 is just showing from Service New Brunswick where the lot is being created in relation to the other properties. Map 3A is showing you the entire property as it appears in GOMB. And map 3B is showing the property to show you where the location of the property is in reference to Hanwell. So as the lot is suitable for the purpose intended, and as the access exists, Staff recommends that the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee of the Capital Region Service Commission 1. Approve a 6-meter wide private access for the development of land to create one lot as shown on plan. Spring Hill Farm subdivision, subject to A, the final plan of subdivision being stamped with private access note, and B, the final plan of subdivision having the following note added. This lot is not to be used for the location of a residential dwelling or any other use that requires a septic system. And 2, approve the following variances. A 36 square meter variance in the area of a lot to create lot 23-1 with an area of 400 square meters. B, it looks like it's A again. Sorry about that.
Oh, I've got, is that down here?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's B.
okay. I do have 3. B, a 34 meter variance in the width of a lot to create lot 23-1 with a width of 20 meters. And C, an 18 meter variance in the depth of a lot to create lot 23-1 with a depth of 20 meters. And that's my presentation.
Okay, can I have a motion, please?
I move that the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee of the Capital Region Service Commission, 1, approve a 6-meter wide private access for the development of land to create one lot as shown on tentative plan Spring Hill Farm subdivision, subject to A, the final plan of subdivision being stamped with private access note, and B, the final plan of subdivision having the following note added. This lot is not to be used for the location of a residential dwelling or any other use that requires a septic system. And 2, approve the following variances. A, a 3,600 square meter variance in the area of a lot to create lot 23-1 with an area of 400 square meters. B, a 34 meter variance in the width of the lot to create lot 23-1 with a width of 20 meters. And C, an 18 meter variance in the depth of a lot to create a lot 23-1 with a depth of 20 meters.
Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Any questions, comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Contrary minded? Motion carried, thank you. Now, moving on to item 7, the Capital Regional Service Commission, and Jason Curry and Jessica Richard, terms and conditions. And I believe we have some folks in the viewing audience tonight that would have some comments. All I ask is the comments are original and not a repeat of everybody's comments. So if anybody wants to take over and bring some comments up to council, feel free.
Did you want to present?
I didn't hear what you said.
Should Robin present first?
Yes,
Good.
Robin needs
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, she should present first.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So just
We have
before,
to make a motion before it can be discussed.
Yes.
Yeah, you're good.
just before I go through the presentation, I just want to let everyone know that our office has received many questions and comments related to this application. And I just want to state again that the portable sawmill use is a permitted use in the Kingsclear Rural Plan Rural Zone. This plan has been in effect since 2006, signed up by the Minister of Department of Environment. Rural plans are created when working with the community, working groups, public open houses, etc. This is part of the Kingsclear Rural Plan Rural Zone. So I'm here tonight to provide information along with the terms and conditions as are recommended by the Capital Region Service Commission staff. The Hamel Council can recommend changes, additions, or remove any of the suggested terms and conditions. The Planning Review and Adjustment Committee, PRAC, is the body that has the authority to approve this application. Comments provided by the Hamel Council will be included in the public PRAC meeting. And now for the presentation. So Jason Curry and Jessica Richard, terms and conditions application for permitted use of a portable sawmill as permitted in the rural zone of the Kingsclear Planning Area Rural Plan Regulation, Community Planning Act. Property is located off Graham Drive in Island View. The Capital Region Service Commission provides building inspection, development, planning, and enforcement services to the Hanwell rural community. The Planning and Development Division of the Capital Region Service Commission received a complaint concerning the sawmill located at 84 Graham Drive, having PID number 7555-1531, owned by the applicant. And the property is in the rural zone of the Kingsclear Planning Area Rural Plan. A portable sawmill use is permitted in this zone, however subject to terms and conditions. The Kingsclear Planning Area Rural Plan defines a portable sawmill as means any land used for the changing of raw timber into new lumber products involving the operation of a portable milling device, which by design is clearly intended to be easily and frequently transported. The portable sawmill is for personal use. The applicant is self-employed, typically working Monday to Friday. The sawmill shows 10 hours of use since mid-April of this year. The applicant will make use of the sawdust created, as there are many uses that can be applied to their own property. The area around the property is woodland and residential homes. The applicant's home is also located on PID number 7555-1531, and there are no watercourses or wetlands on this property. No interdepartmental consultations, external consultations, notification of the meeting sent to property owners within 100 meters of the property. We'll just go through some of the attachments before we get to the recommendations. So map 1 is showing the property as it appears in Service, New Brunswick. Map 2, GOMB, again just showing the property and showing that there are no watercourses on that property. And GOMB 2B is showing the location of the property, the vicinity of where it's located. Attachment A is the application from the applicant, their terms and conditions application. And it includes a drawing of where things are located on the lot. And that's it.
Thank you, Robert.
I'm not done.
Oh, sorry.
As stated, this is a permitted use in the rural zone of the Kingsclear County Planning Area Rural Plan Regulations, subject to terms and conditions. This application is brought forward to the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee of the Capital Region Service Commission to decide what, if any, terms and conditions it feels are necessary. The proposed terms and conditions recommended by staff reflect the proponent's stated vision of the use as given with the application and will ensure the use does not create land use conflicts with the surrounding properties. Staff recommends that the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee of the Capital Region Service Commission allow the permitted use of a portable sawmill on PID number 7555-1531 in the rural zone of the Kingsclear Planning Area Rural Plan Regulation Community Planning Act, subject to the following terms and conditions. A, that Monday through Friday hours of operations will be 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., that Saturday and Sunday hours of operation will be 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., that where possible, item C, where possible, existing trees and shrubs are maintained around the perimeter of the property, and D, that outdoor lighting be located, arranged, or shielded as not to interfere with traffic proceeding along Graham Drive or with nearby landowners in the reasonable enjoyment of the properties. That's my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Robert. I think before we move on to a motion, I'll allow the public to make comments now. So if there's anything that we want to put in the motion, we can do it before we make the motion. So we wanted to make any alterations to our motion. So now I'll call for the public to for any comments they'd like to make.
If anybody wanted to comment, you can come up to the podium and.
I just got a question. So you're saying that about, I'm just wondering about where this wood is coming from. So we're saying it's on, like in the, I looked at the, whatever, the email we sent out, and it was saying like, this is the lot, this is the portable sawmill, but which is built into a permanent structure around said portable sawmill, which indicates, anyway, but if you look at that, and where is the wood coming from? Because if you look at the very last hand-drawn image, it says wood lot is actually at the end of the property, right? Do you know what I'm saying? So that is not, the sawmill is located, correct, right at the back far corner, I don't know, right there. So then if you look at that last drawing, it says the wood lot is behind. So they would be drawing wood and taking it from the lot, which runs all the way back for hundreds of acres. And that definitely does go over waters and streams. So I don't understand how they could be doing that. that isn't being taken into effect. Where's he getting the wood from? Because that area is a protected water area, and he's gonna have you pulling the wood in over waters and streams, and that's a problem. And also the thing about being notified, if we're looking at the sawmill is being 100 meters from people's houses, but if he's pulling wood and accessing it, you can't just go and take a little piece of wood back across. I was not notified, and it would be directly in my backyard that he's taking the wood from. So, I mean, that's a bit of a problem. You didn't notify any of us, right? And that's, so it's not just the sawmill, it's also the idea of where is this wood coming from, and it is not from that one little property he's on. It is marked down on the last bit, the very last drawing, which is like a little hand drawing thing. It says woodlot, which is not from his property, it's the hundreds of acres in behind. Which owned by the family and is filled with water. So I don't know how environmentally you can go and access that, because that doesn't meet the criteria.
Do we just kind of walk up as we're ready to go?
Sure.
Okay.
Can I just say that each person should say their name before they present? Sorry.
Sorry. Oh, say.
Hello, Jared Dooley is my name. I'm a resident of the neighborhood in question. Rob and I spoke with you yesterday, and I did send an email through. I just want to make sure that that got addressed. But in the email, I addressed a few key talking points in regards to the concerns that I have, but I know that they're not unique and limited to just me. So, in a previous neighborhood that I lived in, a portable sawmill existed. That sawmill caught fire. It burned down the structure that it was inside, the mill itself, and then the property that resided on it. It was in Kelly's Creek. It was in 2015. No one was home at the time. There was no clarification on what actually instigated the fire. I remember the day well. My house was 4 properties away from it. It was a hot day. I own a wood manufacturing business. I also work in and amongst saws, wood can self-combust on hot days. At the end of the day, I remember having to go to my home, hose down my roof because it was recommended that anybody that was in the neighboring area go do so, because there was a risk that the neighboring properties could actually catch. That's a scary thing to think about, this being a residential neighborhood, okay? Point 2, I don't see how 8 to 8, Monday to Friday, 10 to 4 on Saturday and Sunday is deemed a hobby. That's a major concern to me. Those are hours that I work within as a self-employed individual as well. I don't see how this is a hobby. Concrete pad and the structure that it sits on looks very permanent to me. I would question what the portion of portable this object is at this point. If you see photos of the way that it sits currently, there's no portable component to it. I suppose if there's enough people or machinery to be able to pick something up, everything can become portable. But at the end of the day, the way that it shows in the actual finished position that it's in, it's definitely not portable. I'd really like to understand the way that any offcuts, sawdust, basically the handling of all the byproduct is going to be dealt with. Basically the house that caught fire that I spoke of earlier, the gentleman was, it was deemed that the Department of Environment understood that he was basically burying all of his offcuts into the ground. I'm not accusing Mr. Curry of doing that, but I'm pointing out the fact that if there's no actual clear present plan on how to deal with all of the rubbish, then there's a concern that that's going to be left as dry wood, and it's going to be basically fuel for a fire. The restrictive covenants is also a concern. With this address entering off of a street built in the neighborhood, I understand this Kingsclear thing, that's the way that it reads, but what I don't understand is how Kingsclear itself is different from the neighborhood that's in question, where the right-of-way that this gentleman has for his property actually is an address based on our neighborhood. The restricted covenants stop me from doing lots of things on my own property that I would love to do. What I don't understand is how a sawmill is going to be some sort of hobby within the hours that are actually dictated. I'd like to understand more about the border. What I don't see is I don't see a scale drawing with mathematics that show where this object is supposed to be. I see a hand drawing. I'd also like to understand the size and the ratio and balance of how much the bordering trees and shrubs are gonna be. That could mean a lot of things. It could mean a small bush, it could mean 100 feet. I think there needs to be some clarification on that. That's all I bring to this meeting at this point. Thank you for the time.
My name is Ross Mathers. I live on Country Lane in Islandview. I have a few concerns, and I guess one of them is there was a number of letters written to you, Robin, and I hope the council has those.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll be short, then I won't try to repeat it all. Fire, of course, is always a concern, and in our neighborhood, somebody had bushes chipped. They were sitting in a pile on their property. One day I was walking by with my dogs. There was smoke coming out of those piles. Internal combustion. We broke up the piles, no damage, nothing occurred. I hope that's the last time we have smoke in our subdivision that's unintended. Increased truck traffic. This property is at the end of Trail Drive. Trail Drive has a lot of new residents on it with young children. When I moved there over 40 years ago, we had a lot of young children. They're coming back. They're playing on their driveways. They're playing on the streets. Okay? People walk. There's no sidewalks in that subdivision. There's no lights at night. Sorry, there's a few lights at night on people's private property. I'm really concerned. The kids play, the dogs go for walking with their owners, and some people do drive fast, and this just increases the traffic. Residential area, as you just heard, there are restrictive covenants in that subdivision. I'll give you a quote from it. Any trade, business, or manufacturer, or anything in the nature thereof, or having the appearance of, or show thereof, neither the lands nor any building erected upon them shall be used for any purpose which may become a nuisance. So, if this indeed is there, I'm not sure why going through residential subdivision that can't do this stuff, you're allowed to do it. Noise, we all know the noise that can be created. Pollution, there's various types of pollution possible, such as noise, fuel spills, which would damage wells, they're all wells in that area, and air pollution. Many mills require large quantities of water in the process of cutting logs. Where's this water coming from? Can it affect our water table? Long-term intentions. We're not sure of the long-term intentions. It doesn't say in the application or in the proposal that you put forward, Robin, of the long-term intentions or the limits to the use of the sawmill. Other considerations. What type of structure is underneath the sawmill? We found out that it's concrete. If it's concrete, does that meet the definition and intent of a portable sawmill? It is supposed to be easily moved. How will the concrete pad be moved? How much wood is intended to be cut each year? Will there be limits placed on this so the applicant can be allowed to cut wood for his own use? Can the applicant cut wood from an adjacent lot, which he has access to? Will the cut logs be used for building the structure? And I don't know how many of you know this, but if you cut those logs and put them in the structure and their support, they have to be certified by an engineer in this province. You can't just go sticking up and put wood somewhere and call it a house. If formal approval for use of the wood is not obtained, is there a liability on the Hanwell Council and the CRSC because they approved this application without the appropriate limits? That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Eric Ross, and I live in the subdivision. I spoke with Mr. Curry about what he intends to, I saw the sawmill. I spoke with him and he told me what he intends to use it for. I didn't see it in the application exactly. I see hobby listed. You can correct me if I'm wrong. He mentioned that he was going to use the saw to cut wood to build a garage for his house. and then eventually build a house there. That doesn't sound like a hobby to me. It sounds like he has purpose, and I want you to be able to do that. Okay, but I would like to know the timeline in which he plans on completing those things for his family. If he can present that today, that would be fantastic, you know, with the, like, hey, here's when I plan on starting to build my garage and my house for my family, and here's the date I expect to complete my garage and my house for my family. I think every man should have that opportunity. But I would like to see a detailed timeline upon completion of that. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Amber Lang. I live at 85 Graham. I've got a few concerns, I guess, and questions. I know that we had 4 days to put forth concerns, which was not a lot of time to figure out what was going on. I know nothing about sawmills, so I had to do some research. And immediately, you know, I had concerns with the health concerns. I mean, it's, you know, sawdust is, according to the World Health Organization, a carcinogen. It causes, you know, breathing problems. It can cause asthma. It can cause irritation of the skin and the eyes and the nose and the everything. The combustible, you know, and explosive sawdust, that there's the potential. And so, you know, that's aside from the noise, which is pretty much right next door to me. And my father lives at 89 Graham, and so between us spending our times in both yards, it'll be right there. But what I'm curious about, I guess, is that all of these people have put forward major concerns, and I've read most or many of the letters that were forwarded to you, Robin.
Yes.
And I'm just surprised that with everything that has been brought forward, that the recommendation has still gone through as it initially was before we were even consulted. And so that's a little disheartening. But also, I think that you've likely been misled. Like people have mentioned, it looks like a very permanent structure. You know, money has been invested in this. There's a concrete pad, there's a shelter, you know, there's the letter from Andy Graham, you know, stating the horsepower involved that is, you know, in his opinion, definitely beyond anything that anybody would purchase as a hobby. From what I understand, there's no one monitoring, you know, whether the conditions are being followed, and, you know, any consequences that might come from not following the conditions, and consequences seem nil to zero. And so with the hundreds of acres attached to this property, you know, on the application it looks like this 2 point whatever acres is the only thing in question. But with the permanency of this portable sawmill setup and the wood that's accessed or accessible, it's not adding up. And so that's my concern. And like the gentleman previous to me said, if there was, you know, a timeline with very specific, you know, times and areas and all of that, if it was to mill for the building of his home, that's one thing. But if you're milling hundreds of acres when you've asked to mill 2.5 acres, and there's really no consequence for going beyond what the agreement was, or does this open the door to, you know, once I'm done milling this 2.5 acres, you know, I've got 150 more or whatever it is acres, does that make it easier for the next one to get approved? And so I guess, you know, the concerns of the health concerns, the fire concerns, the noise, if it was what it appears, the concerns wouldn't be as great. But my concern is what it actually is and what it could become.
My name is Sarah Meek. I live in the community. Wasn't prepared to speak today, but I've been moved to. I grew up in this community. I was pretty much born and raised there. I moved away going to university and came back and bought a house in this neighborhood to raise my 2 young kids in. When this fine gentleman said that there's kids playing on the streets and on the driveways, those kids are mine. And they're my neighbor's kids. And people just, it's a beautiful sanctuary of a neighborhood. All you can hear is birds chirping and leaves rustling. It's beautiful. And since it's in a valley, noise travels. Amber, I'm sure I've heard your kids in the pool. You know, from my house, the sound travels. So the sound of the mill is going to be so loud. It's going to travel. I can hear dogs barking, 20 houses down. So I just really implore you to consider the enjoyment of the rest of the neighborhood to continue living in this sanctuary that has been developed over the course of almost 40 years. And really, I'd also like to highlight the fire aspect. It's kind of emotional because in my old house that I lived in, that wasn't in this neighborhood, but also in Fredericton, I had a neighbor who was sawing logs, and there was a lot of sawdust, and on a hot day, 30 plus, that sawdust instantly combusted. And before I knew it, there was flames multiple meters high in his backyard, and he was asleep inside the house. So I know it happens. And then even last week, I was the only one to pull over on the Woodstock Road when a bunch of sawdust and sod started combusting as well. So it's not just fiction, it happens. So unless there's real protocols to make sure that the sawdust is taken care of, it could combust and become a fire hazard for the rest of our homes. And the last thing I will mention is that there is waterways in the area. There's streams that a lot of us take our kids to, and we wade in it, and our dogs swim in it. So the thought that there's no wetlands attached is really false in my mind. There's definitely streams that go right by the property. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
Are we allowed to come up and address some of these
Oh,
concerns?
yes, absolutely, yes.
So we are Jessica and Jason, the applicants for this sawmill. As Robin mentioned, we are a rural property, so this is permitted use. I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but there are multiple subdivisions within this area. It's not just Valley View Estates. Valley View Estates has the restrictive covenants that people are referring to. We live in Curry subdivision. There are no restrictive covenants. Our direct neighbors live in Depot subdivision, I believe it's called. I'm not sure what they have for restrictive covenants, but the fact that, Valley View Estates has restrictive covenants, we do not in Curry subdivision. So that's just one point to bring up.
That's accurate. I don't believe, we'll have to find the paperwork for
Well,
that. But
it was approved by the commission when we,
You drive through our subdivision to
Okay.
get to your home. Your address is in our subdivision.
Right.
And the Deposed subdivision was my family, my grandparents were the Deposed.
So the sawmill in question, it's a Range Road 5026. This was purchased for $3,500. It's not an industrial sawmill by any means. The company we purchased it from is Canadian owned. They sell small footprint equipment, so not industrial use. It is EPA certified, it's passed Canadian Environmental Protection Act. The motor size is 15 horsepower. Our lawn tractor is 17 horsepower. The motor is not big on this thing. It is a very, very small sawmill. It is 100% for personal use. We have no intention of selling one stick off of our land. And if anyone would have come and talked to us beforehand, we would have told them that. As far as the sound, I contacted the manufacturer. The decibels for our sawmill are 85 to 90 at full throttle, so that's when it's under load, not at an idle. The average ride-on lawn tractor decibels are 90, so it is the same level of noise as a ride-on lawn tractor. So
How long does it
Yeah,
take
for
to mow your
72
grass? Hour?
Mayor Morrison, can you step in here,
Yes.
please?
Hello, come again?
Can you,
Remind people.
that they need to let other people speak and finish?
Yes.
I got the reminder.
As far as timing, the sawmill was set up in mid-April and it was used for 6 weeks. I'm not sure how many people in the neighborhood were even aware that it was being used because it's not that loud. The intended use is to mill wood for our personal projects only. As I mentioned, 0 wood will be sold, no intentions of running a business. Safety concerns, the sawmill has built-in safety mechanisms. Water runs on the blade while it's in use. Immediately after the machine is shut off, you can touch the blade, it's not hot to the touch. We have 2 fire extinguishers that are kept by the sawmill, and our garden hose is within reach of the sawmill. The sawdust that comes off of the sawmill is minimal. We collect it and put it in our chicken coop. There is no sawdust laying around. I don't know if there's any other things you want to address about.
The timing, the 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That does not mean by any means that I intend to run the sawmill that amount of hours. What it is I'm a self-employed tile installer, and days that are short, I might want to start the thing for 2 hours and mill. After that, I'm tired, I'm sore, and I have no interest in doing that kind of labor for 12 hours a day. It's just to give me that window of opportunity that when I have available time, I can mill. That's basically
If there's anything else, the questions about removing trees across waterways. This property has been in the Curry family for over 100 years. We're not changing any use of the property. We have been cutting trees to use
for many years.
for many years, and we don't intend to change any of that. This is part of our woodlot management strategy to remove fall downs and trees that have already fallen, which decreases the risk of potential forest fires as it removes these accelerants in the way.
Okay. Is there any other public comments?
Thank you.
One more. Obviously you don't have to do this, it's free will. Can you explain to the members here listening and here what your intended use of, that you explained to me when I went and saw you, on what you're gonna use that sawmill for? Exactly as you detailed to me. You don't have to do it, but maybe you should.
That sawmill was to be used for personal projects around the yard. For building fences around my garden to keep the many animals we have in the neighborhood out. To build a fence in the backyard for my dog, to build a tree house for my daughter. The list goes on and on and on of opportunities, whereas we have the resources there. I plan on using any lumber I can and am permitted to use to build structures. There is building codes in place that regulate the use of rough sawn wood, and I'm aware of that and will follow those codes.
Thank you.
I guess one more question. Are you planning on milling or building in any area other than that than the PID that's addressed in the
Elaborate, what do you mean?
do you plan on clearing wood from
Yes.
the woodlot beyond your 2 point whatever acres that is included in this permit request?
Selectively, yes. It's not going to be all cleared. It would be a mature tree that is in danger of falling or one
So
that is already
it
fell.
seems to me like it's, like when I look through the request, that's a misleading request. It's 2.5 acres is what the request is addressing. And it doesn't, basically that's saying we can use any of the wood from the hundreds of however many acres that are behind that. And is there plans to build structures beyond that 2.5 acres or have structures on that area?
There is no plans in place for that.
My name is Raylene Terrio. I live at 100 Graham. My question would be, who monitors Mr. Curry's adherence to any terms and conditions that will be applied if he is indeed approved?
Do we know?
Anybody? As I said, our department does I just forgot my word.
Monitoring?
Yeah, well,
That's what
we don't do monitoring on a 24-hour, 7-day basis. Most of what we would do is, it's complaint-based. We would have no way of knowing if somebody was working at 9 o'clock when they should have only been to 8. We have no way of knowing that.
Again, that is a concern because Mr. Curry can bar residents from crossing his property line. So, if you don't know what use he is making of that land because you can't access it, although there's evidence that there's a greater use than the terms and conditions provide for, do we not have a very legitimate concern that perhaps there is going to be a creep towards a more robust use of the land and of the mill?
Would you like me to address that, Your Worship?
Yes, go ahead.
My name's Lonnie Forbes. I'm the General Manager, Regional Service Commission 11. This 100-acre woodlot that we're talking about, that the Currys own, they do not need any permission from me, our staff, or Hanwell, or Prac. It is an outright permitted use to go on their woodlot and cut trees. If they are within the 30-meter buffer of a wetland or a brook, then they're obligated to deal with the Department of Environment to get a Wawa permit to cross it or selective harvest within it, and the Department of Environment will issue those permits. I know because I'm a woodlot owner. As Robin said, the majority of our monitoring comes about through complaints. We do not have enough capacity in our staff to go to every place once a week or once a month. Do we go occasionally? Yes, we certainly do. We show up at an inappropriate time, somebody's in the area doing a building permit, they may drop by. But that's how the monitoring is done. And tacking the 2.2 acres to the 100 acres is not necessarily applicable in the application. The 2.2 acres is applicable because that is where they want to place the sawmill. The 100 acres they already own or family owns. It doesn't require permission to go in and selectively harvest it. Anywhere's in Kingsclear rural area. You know, you'll see some woodlots that are completely made flat. If he's selectively harvesting it, I would suggest that's a good thing as opposed to clear cutting it. But that's my opinion.
I'd like to add further comment in. The mere fact that the monitoring is complaint-based, and to your point, he has full permission to use the rest of the property for extraction of raw material to use in the mill. You just removed just about any comfort that I might have had in terms of the statements that Mr. Curry and Mr. Richard made, because there will be nothing to prevent them from expanding the use of this mill as he clears out that 2.5 acres, and then all of the concerns regarding fire hazard and noise pollution becomes even greater to the neighborhood. Thank you.
And with respect, I don't think anybody is, arguing that they have the right to cut down trees on their property. The question becomes how much and when is it not a hobby? And so if they're milling their 100 and some acres, where you mentioned that it's not a factor in this application, I would argue that it becomes a factor when it increases the amount to the level where it is no longer a hobby. If it is to build a tree house and a fence, then that would not be an issue. But it sounds like, with 100+ acres available and no one monitoring and them having the right to do what they want when they want, and no trespassing signs up for anyone to check otherwise, it's just kind of a free-for-all. And with the setup of the seemingly permanent setup that's there now, it could just go on forever. And the hazards increase with the amount that increases of the milling. And so the 100 acres to me is very relevant.
And I would say as a portable chainsaw mill hobbyist, we actually have a chainsaw. We have milled wood. We live at the bottom of the valley, so people probably don't hear it. And I know that's like fluctuating times when you're doing it. As a hobbyist, that's what we do. He's retired military. When he's well enough to do something, he does it. I think that would be more within the guidelines. This idea of it being a portable and a hobby. And I feel for you. I get like wanting to clear land and do stuff around the house. We dealt with all the dead trees that were falling on our property and tried to turn them into a fence. I think that fits within a residential framework. When it gets to, it's the idea of the permanence of the structure, and like if there was a timeline as to how this, how they're doing it, but sitting there all day long listening to the noise. And honestly, it's a really wide time frame, from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. My husband's a retired veteran. We moved to the community because he has hyperacusis and severe PTSD. I went there for peace of mind. If that chainsaw goes all day, I'm gonna have to sell my house and move, because it's just gonna be a ringing in his ear. And if it was like a smaller time frame, I might even be able to live with that. But 8 till 8, and then on Saturday and Sunday too, I don't think any of you would really want that in your backyard. And I feel for you guys, but I think even if you, I don't know, for me, if you lessen the amount of time or something like that, but it is a bit scary to think that suddenly there's a sawmill next door, right? And as someone, as I said, we do it as a hobby. This seems a little not hobbyish.
As we mentioned, we both work full-time. He will not be running it from 8 to 8. It's just so that
I have an
he has
opportunity.
the opportunity. Like, he's self-employed sometimes. He'll go to a job in the morning. It's not ready for him. He can't go back till 10 o'clock. He would love to pop home and use the mill for an hour. Maybe he won't. Maybe he'll do something else. It's just so that it is there in case he has the opportunity. He has no intentions of running the sawmill for 12 hours a day.
If you have run a sawmill yourself, you have experience and know how heavy everything is and how much work is involved. There will be no employees on my property. It is not something that is going to be, it's had 9.6 hours of use since April 18th until May 30th when the first complaint came in, the only complaint that I received. And that was what my average would be. In 42 days, 9.7 hours.
As I mentioned, the sound level is less than or equal to a ride-on lawn tractor, which is constant in this neighborhood. You always hear a ride-on lawn tractor. So as far as that ruining your personal enjoyment, if you can handle a ride-on lawn tractor at all hours of the day, a sawmill for a couple hours of the day isn't going to make any difference.
This is a fire hazard.
It's definitely more than the noise.
I'd like to just bring back the talking point of the offcuts, the rubbish, the handling of all the basically the byproduct.
We burn firewood, so.
That's wonderful. I give you guys the benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to stand in the way of someone trying to improve their life, but what I do want to bring to light is that there is a real fire risk, whether it's a small unit or a large unit. When you're dealing with dry timber, especially in this environment that we find ourselves in with the risk of fires, the suppression systems that are required to be able to mitigate that risk, especially with the proximity based on the hand drawing to the neighborhood, the properties that we're living in, it's alarming. And I truly believe that that needs to be considered. If the reality is that there's no way to stand in front of the fact that it's usable or not usable and that it's deemed usable, that's not the talking point here. The talking point here are the terms and conditions that we were allowed to bring forward. The conditions that we have yet to actually determine, one of which should be fire. It's a real issue. Enough said. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for your comments, folks. We've had an awful lot of comments up here tonight. We've had several written-in comments. I think council has a big decision to make. We can do one of three things here tonight. We can either take the information as presented from the Regional Service Commission and put that through. We can actually add other terms and conditions, such as hours of operation, fire protection, disposal of debris like brush products, something like that. Or we can table this to our next meeting where council has time to digest all the comments that were made tonight in order to make a much better informed decision if there's going to be any, what if any other limiting conditions we'll put forward. So I'll just ask council what they prefer to do tonight, whether there's basically one of the three to pick from.
I have a question for either Lonnie or Robin. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. As for the concern of fire, is there anything that we can? Is there any kind of a reasonable thing that we can put on the sawdust and the removal of sawdust or storage of sawdust? Have we ever done anything like that before at Prague?
You could limit the amount that is stored on site. If they're using it on site, let's say they got a walking trail and they want to put some sawdust on the bottom of the walking trail so it's softer to walk on. If they're using it to bed their chickens with or something, the amount of sawdust that they're storing on site, you could put a quantity amount to that so that it limits the amount that's stored on site.
Okay, and because this thing is only going to be used, temporarily, like from time to time, as they're saying, they've only used it 10 hours in the last couple of months or so. Would it be reasonable to put in a restriction that they must remove it from accumulating in a large amount and do something with it, either remove it or use it for their projects?
Well, large amount to you or to me or anybody sitting here might mean something different.
Yeah.
You really, if we're gonna limit them to a volume to be stored on site, we should put a quantity to it.
I'm just wondering what your guys' educated recommendation might be as far as fire safety. If you have one.
Well, that's a better question for your counselor that's on the fire department than myself.
Good. All right, Lee, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, Councillor Fox or Councillor Hyslop, who's next?
Look, I'd just like to move to suspend the rules.
We already suspended them when Mayor Morrison called for us to ask questions.
So who wants to go first, Councillor Hyslop or Councillor Kraus?
Well, my question, Robin, when do you need this by? My understanding is this is going to Prac on the 27th?
Yes.
So is this a decision that we need to make this evening? Or can we table it at Prac to give us more time?
If you table your decision tonight.
Right, Prac will make the decision?
Then we can either send it through to Prac or we can table it at Prac until we get your decision.
Which would you do, is the question.
I will table it. If council tonight wants further discussion and options for them, then if that's the decision of council is to table it tonight, then we will table it for a future date.
My other question then being is, again, with regard to fire suppression, is there anything we can do to say they need this, and this in regards to fire suppression to operate the sawmill? The other thing is, it was brought up, is more in terms of their woodlot management strategy and what you actually have that might, if it was given to council or everybody else, might give them a little bit of peace of mind about what's happening with all the wood and on the woodlot, 100 acres and everything. It's possible. And then I have a whole slew of other stuff that they're valid concerns that are being brought up. So I personally would like more time, but I'll hand it over to Lee Kraus to.
Okay, Councillor Kraus is gonna speak.
Well, honestly, I really can't comment on that because it's not, this is not in our mandate as the fire service. Our mandate is property and people. So to say that, you know, what I would probably do for myself if I had a woodlot and was doing that, and knowing the weather and the right conditions that we rarely get around here, I'd like to see it watered down. But as to say to comment on it, I couldn't even do that because, like I said, it's not something that we as the volunteer fire service can do. That is basically with Service Commission and, you know, something like in the city of Fredericton where they have their own bylaws set up for like fire pits and stuff like that. See, we have no say. We can't even come and inspect your chimney or anything like that because it just puts us in a liability. So I really can't comment on the outside of the fact that wet it down in the ideal conditions, because I know the fire that Mr. Dooley was talking about because I was there fighting fire and I live in the same neighborhood. And there's another one in my backyard anyway. So, but I do totally understand the fire side of it. I've been a firefighter for 30 years. And yeah, you should have a plan, definitely, but that's not just him, that's everybody. So like I said, I just assume not, because that can come back here and it could come back on the service. So, no, like I said, wet it down if the conditions are there. If you follow the forest fire index. So really the woodlot stuff outside of the Service Commission, I don't know who else could even give you pointers. I've never been there to see the site, so I don't know. You could be in an open area that, you know, is wide open. There's for, you know, an open net for an acre or two. I'm not without seeing.
Councillor Peck, did you have anything you wanted to say?
I do. As most of you know, this project is in the ward that I represent. And before becoming a councillor in Hanwell Rural Community, represented the Kingsclear Local Service District on the advisory committee for 7 years. So I'm familiar with the area. I feel a sense of obligation to people who want to use their land as they choose, but also to people who have very valid concerns about what that represents, as in what the use of the land by a landowner represents. So all of us as councillors will be thinking of those things, weighing one against another. It doesn't serve any of us to not consider all aspects, all concerns, all comments, all worries. That said, I note that Ms. Canavan mentioned the rural plan for Kingsclear Local Service District, which is still being used in this case based on municipal reform not having immediately meant there's a revised rural plan. Since it's been in place since 2006, 2007, and it took a number of years to create before that. To me personally, with my years of experience of living in the area and representing issues like this before, being that old doesn't mean it's tried and true. To me, it means being that old is a concern. I think local government knows that too. And the folks at the Service Commission are working very hard to do, in conjunction with the council here, the work required for revision. The reason I think that has a role to play here, I'm looking around this podium, sorry, is that right now we have a rural zoned area butt up against a subdivision which is a residential area. And through an arrangement with property owners, an easement has been granted that was truly received, I'm sure, as it was meant to be given for the benefit of neighbor relations. What does that mean as time has passed, however? Perception of a conflict between people in a neighborhood and the reality of a conflict regarding rules and regulations of a rural plan can often be this far apart, but it's the perception of it being an issue that is the concern to me. I personally feel that we have a good number of, I won't call them complaints, I'm going to list them as concerns because they really are your concerns. Moving them into complaints is not something I like to think being a reality. So when you mentioned that monitoring is complaint-based, that it is not going to move away from the perception of a conflict, it'll move into the reality of a conflict. I think that fire is on everyone's mind at the present time, based on what happened in southern New Brunswick, which occurred simply by the spark of an ATV. We're not talking about planned arsonist sort of fire. It was an accident, but look at the repercussions. Everyone worries that that could happen in our well-forested Hanwell rural community. Look at what happened in Tantallon, Nova Scotia. That was a subdivision, and that is a concern for people living in a subdivision here in Hanwell rural community. So I'm not sure that having more time will make me change my mind about this being such a very valid concern, and about the possibility of working with the proponents on some sort of modification of your plan, perhaps of location of the sawmill, or of the ways to address the very valid concerns about fire, pollution, and so on in time. The fact of the matter is, council cannot say no to this. We can add terms and conditions, we can take them away, but the way this works is it will go to PRAC if we move it beyond council, and PRAC will make the decision, and our involvement in anything beyond that is simply then going back to dealing with it as a resident-to-resident interaction with council. It's very, very difficult, but I don't think not making a decision tonight is in the best interest of the public who want to know.
Okay.
Sorry, I talked a lot.
Councillor Fox, any comment?
Should I get my name on the list when you're done? I can't see anybody.
Yes.
Well, I think,
Okay,
I think Councillor Peck spoke very well to what we're facing. You know, from my perspective, I'm mostly concerned about coming up with some kind of condition that alleviates the concerns over the fire hazard. I don't know how we do that now, but that would be my only concern. It's a permitted use, but I would want to have something that addresses the fire hazard.
I don't think we can do that tonight. I think we have to have more time to explore what kind of limiting conditions we can put in around fire service.
Mayor Morrison, Deputy Mayor Jonah wanted to speak.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to make one suggestion. I would run it by Lonnie and Robin. I was just thinking in terms of timing to get this to Prac on the 27th. Because as you know, Prac can also add terms and conditions. I'm wondering if between now and the 27th, if the landowner could work with the Regional Service Commission to maybe come up with some kind of a recommendation regarding fire safety, to see if there's something that they could agree on to make it more safe, and put that in as a term and condition at the Prac meeting on the 27th. Is that doable, do you think?
Yep.
That is their main concern, is fire.
No, that's just one
So
of
much
many.
more.
It's one of many.
It just seems to be the flavor of the day, that's all.
I mean, the how much and the
It
how long.
is a permitted use, and we have heard from both sides. There seems to be no intent to run this as a commercial business. There seems to be no intent to bring wood in over the streets there. And as far as their wood lot from behind, there really is, as Lonnie has told us, there really is no, we can't oversee how someone cuts their wood lot. If they chose to clear cut it tomorrow, as long as they met environmental standards, it could be done. So I think that they've kind of, done their due diligence and have come in and told us honestly, hopefully their plans for the future. And, this is a permitted use. We have to remember that. So, I mean, we do have to try and keep everybody, hopefully, being conscious of each other's feelings and as far as noise and timing and all that sort of thing. And I think they've all been addressed here tonight. So really, I see it as fire safety as being a very important issue. I'm just wondering if there's any way I think we can work that out between now and the 27th so that this can be settled. Oh, can't hear you, Dave. Anyway, that was all I had to say. I can't hear what everybody else is doing now.
No. Okay, what's the council's preference? What do we want to do? Hello?
Hello? I can't hear anybody
Oh,
except you.
he wants to know what council's preference is. Do you want to?
Is it possible for Lonnie or Robin to answer my question? Like, is it doable to have something for the 27th to work out a condition regarding fire?
If it was the decision of council tonight to ask Capital Region Service Commission 11 to work with the applicant to come up with some additional conditions to address some of the concerns done tonight, we would endeavor to do that and present them to Prac.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea.
That seems reasonable to me if anyone else agrees.
Councillor Peck has a question.
If that's the case, the public that have joined us this evening have an option to attend Prac next
They do.
Tuesday night. And if the Prac committee members received the results of your working with the proponents, would they receive it in time for that meeting, and/or would representatives here receive what the changed terms and conditions were
We
before
would
coming?
endeavor to do that in the next day or two, and we would circulate them via email. And anybody in the audience here tonight wants to sign up for an email of what those changes are, I'd be happy to send them to them.
Okay, so, and then they could, after digesting that, attend the PrAC meeting?
Yep. PrAC meeting is done via Zoom, and the letter that we sent out to those that were within the 100 meters tells them how to access the Zoom meeting and come on.
I have one more question. If that occurs, would it be possible, that I'm going way out on a limb here with this ask, for this Zoom meeting to be attended by residents who are not able to use Zoom or are not comfortable with it? Could they come here and us have Zoom on our facilities for them? Is that at all possible?
I'm not here.
Okay. Our clerk is on vacation next week. Yes, don't ask me, ask him.
I just want to build on what you said there, Debbie. Just recognizing the fact that the majority of a large portion of the residents that are in the neighborhood that is in question here, I'm speaking on their behalf, but the conversations that I have had with them at the end of my driveway when I walk the neighborhood is that Zoom is a complicated thing for them. So not necessarily is it that it would be it wouldn't be fair to say that people that would have an opportunity in a personal setting, they may not be able to attend it or know how to, just as something to consider.
Well, either way, it's eventually going to go to PrAC, and people will have an opportunity to get an email to know what's going on, to respond by email, even if they aren't comfortable with the Zoom meeting. Or they could probably, since they seem to be chatting with each other anyway, maybe someone could speak on their behalf. I mean,
There's a question.
I don't think there's any more questions being taken
Okay.
by the public.
So do I gather it's council's wishes to table this for a few days until the PrAC meeting to see what we can come up with?
no, I would make a motion that we ask RC 11 to work with the landowner to come up with additional ways of fire safety.
I would also, I think council has other parameters other than fire safety maybe that they would like looked at. Am I wrong?
No, I think that's valid.
That is valid.
And would it be possible for us to draft those in a memo to you and get that to you as soon as we possibly could, to encompass what we've received as comments tonight, which I took notes of, and in the emails? So if we summarize those and amongst ourselves agreed upon additional concerns on behalf of the residents, that'd be possible to get to you?
I think so.
Mr. Chair, it's Robin. I just want to say as well that at the PrAC meeting, everything that's been presented here, and I don't know if you record here or not, but we've all been doing good notes. We do take that information to PrAC, and they will know what took place at the meeting. So it's not that they don't know about it, they will know about it.
Okay. Should we table this for a few days?
Remember, I'm not here, so.
I think we should put a motion forward. We can discuss the motion. we don't make the decision on this at any rate. PrAC makes the decision on this. So we can put a motion forward, see if it passes tonight. It doesn't, it doesn't. And try to move this forward so that PrAC can do their job.
I agree.
I'd like to make a motion that Service Commission planners work with the landowners, particularly about terms and conditions related to fire hazards, and that council collate the comments and circulate them among ourselves to come to an agreement of additional concerns that we have on behalf of landowners, and then see that that's sent to the planners. Long motion, I'll write it down now.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that motion?
I'll second. Let's
Okay.
discuss.
Any discussion, questions, concerns?
So basically what we're saying is we are going to ask RC11 to work with landowner again on concerns, and so we can move forward with this.
And also forward council's concerns.
You're broken up.
Okay. And also forward council's concerns on behalf of concerned citizens.
Sure,
To PrAC.
absolutely.
Any more questions?
Nope.
All right.
For me.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those contrary minded? Okay, motion carried. Thank you, council, and thank you, folks from the area for showing up. You guys had a lot of questions and concerns, and I know council's going to give them a lot of consideration.
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Seconded.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.